Welcome. This is Bonnie McFarland from Los Angeles County Office of Education. Our team is on today, and with us today is Marianne Bjorkman from the California Department of Education, and Marianne is with the Legal Audits and Investigations Branch, the Audits and Investigations Division, and the Fiscal Monitoring Unit at CDE. And the reason we invited Marianne here is not because she has that amazing title and scary audits and investigations, but we invited her here because for two reasons. One, fiscal monitoring is such a critical part of program compliance, and also because Marianne has an amazing way of making the complex very clear and comprehensible. So we're excited to have her here today. Fiscal monitoring we're talking about is where all the pieces come together with multiple programs. So we have a lot of people registered today, and I think that's probably a big part of the reason why. Also, we're happy that she's here because, and that so many of you are here, because compliance monitoring, in particularly fiscal areas, needs to be an ongoing and mutual work between program and fiscal offices, and it needs to be part of what we do every day, not something we do when the review person comes, because usually it doesn't work. Then you're doing cleanup. And what we want to do is operate good programs all the time. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to ask you to put your questions in the chat, and when you do, Marianne has offered to stop periodically, and we'll throw out some of those questions to her. Also, you should have received a reminder this morning with a link to the handouts, and they're also in the chat. You'll find a link to the handouts, and those are going to be updated in just later today. Marianne has included in the presentation slides on some of the more complex areas. She's included notes and detailed information about those areas. What's posted now are just the slides, but we will be posting the slides with the notes later today, so those will be available to you. All right, so as I said, the link is there for the slides in the chat, and we will stop periodically, but put your questions. We'll keep monitoring them. And I am going to, first of all, thank Marianne very, very much for offering to come and join us today. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. That was a very nice welcome. I wanted to let everybody know that's on right now that at the state offices, we are hearing a lot about what's going on at the districts, and so whatever we can do to support you, we really want to do that. And part of that is training in these areas and making sure that you don't have questions right here. Fiscal monitoring also includes federal stimulus funds. It also includes disaster recovery funds. So it's not just fiscal monitoring. We're actually expanding. We have 3 instruments now, and they all deal with internal controls. And the great thing about internal controls, which, I mean, everybody thinks, oh no, internal controls, what is that? It's just basically documentation that allows anyone to come into your district and be able to move forward with whatever position they have. So it's those duties that just need to make sure that happen and occur because of federal funds that you receive. So any questions that you have, please ask me. And Bonnie and her team has been so gracious to upload these slides. There's about 95 of them, so it's quite a lot. And there's also a lot of reading that you can do. So if you have questions specific to your district, please ask them. But I also want you to be able to use this as a resource. So if it turns out that you want to get more information on something, my slides also have all the contact information for the fiscal monitors, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. The purpose, again, for today is specifically to make sure that you guys get your questions answered. So that's really why I'm here. And again, this is just a reference for you. What I received from Bonnie were questions regarding policies and procedures, which are those internal controls that we have, and also specific things regarding timekeeping, how it relates to the LCAP, duty statements, and job descriptions. Some allowable cost questions like what is allowability? How do we tie that into federal funding? Supplement, not supplant, I put in because it's also an allowability issue. It's kind of a sub part to allowability. And also SPSAs and how they play a role in federal funding. There was also a question on Title I reservations, which really doesn't deal with our office, but I have that information in there from the Title I office. So we're first going to get started with some acronyms. And I think that's really a great way to start, because a lot of times I'll say something like Edgar and people will go, what are you talking about? That's the name of a person, right? And that's actually the Education Department General Administrative Regulations. And it's a great thing because you used to have to deal with a lot of different regulations for different titles and different programs and grants. And this consolidated everything for you. So the Uniform Grant Guidance is with Edgar now. So it's really, really important to make sure that you understand what Edgar is. And it's part of that Uniform Grant Guidance. So it's really a place, this link that's down here, click on it and get used to being able to use that as a reference for yourself. It's not really user-friendly, but the more you get into it, the more you'll understand how it's organized, so that you can go and you can say, okay, I need something on allowability. I know it was in there. It's down near the, it's 2 CFR 200 something. So you go in there and you try to look through and see, okay, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for travel. I'm looking for advertising. I'm looking for something that has to do with allowability. And so those things are all in there, and they're ready for you to just click on. So you don't have to have a book. You don't have to have anything except a computer with internet access, and you can really research all the things that are needed. It does get a little confusing sometimes. And again, that's when you probably want to reach out to someone in the Federal Monitoring Unit or to a title specifically, just to see if your question, if it's not answered directly in Edgar, what we would need from you, okay? This is our policies and procedures. And this is a great slide because, like I said, in Edgar, it's not like, okay, this is the policy and procedures part. You need to know all these things. You'll see 2 CFR 200, 302, 318, 319, 474. So there's all different places that you would find this information in Edgar. But I've tried to make it pretty specific so that you know where cash management requirements are. Allowability procedures, you're just saying you have to have those. I'll get a little more specific about our state allowability procedures and where you can find them on our webpage. Conflicts of interest policy, and again, the real key to that is making sure that you yourself as a district have a disciplinary policy in place should a conflict of interest occur. So most of the time we see, everybody knows the conflict of interest policy. They sometimes have Form 700s to make sure that people understand what the requirements are, and that's great, and you do have to have those. But in addition, if something does occur, you have to have a procedure that you follow. And it could be as little as a review by the school board, or it could be something like we will notify our legal department, or whatever you need to do, something that the public would be able to understand. So if you have this policy, the public has a right to know. So if it turns out that there was a conflict of interest, then you would have something in place and people would know what was supposed to occur, and they would expect you to do that. So that's a little dicey, and I've spoken to some legal departments for districts just because they want to make sure that they're doing everything correctly. So it is kind of a deal that you need to make sure you have that in your policies and procedures. Procurement procedures are very specific for the federal government. There are certain caps that they have. And actually in our state, the highest cap where you have to have competitive bidding is much lower than what the federal government has. It's currently $96,700. And that means if you have a vendor that you're paying one particular vendor $97,000, you have to competitively bid that. There's like an RFA process or some kind of sealed bid process that you're using. So that is another place that we see a lot of issues. So we want to make sure that you have procedures that you follow, and you know what you have to do at certain levels. Equipment management procedures, especially with all the Chromebooks and the different laptops that you've received, they have to be labeled in a certain way if federal funding was used to pay for them. That includes the federal stimulus funds. So you need to make sure that you know what you have to put on those labels for all those computers. Travel policy, you know, that's one thing that COVID has done. It's kind of eliminated the travel policy to some extent, but you still have to have it. So it basically in Edgar in 474, you'll be able to see what you have to have in there. The time and effort policies and procedures, really the best place to go is CSAM, the California State Accounting Manual. It has in procedure 905, it has all that you really need. And sometimes it has a lot more. So you'll look at it and you'll go, I wonder if we can do this. Be really careful. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the different options that you have and why you might or might not want to use them. But that is a great place to go. In the policies and procedures, we have these in our instrument all over the place. It's also in the disaster recovery instrument. It's also in the federal stimulus funds instrument. So it's really, really important that you have these. And it like I said, it crosses a lot of instrument lines. The real piece that you need to know as far as policy versus procedure is policy is normally at a state board or at a school board level. So we want to make sure we comply with these rules. We want to make sure that we follow the federal requirements and the state requirements and the local requirements. The procedure is the person who is actually going to be doing all the things to be to do the requirements. That person needs to know, okay, first I need to talk to the county treasury to get the information on the interest rate for the cash management. So you have steps that you have to follow in order to be able to comply with all the requirements. So the procedure is very detailed. It's normally not what you have at the board level. It's normally what you have at the personal level or something on your shared drive where people can go and say, I need to know how to do this. How do I do that? You go in there and look under something like federal program funds and see, this is what I need to do for cash management. This is what I need to do for allowability. This is what I need to do for time and effort documentation, and who's responsible for each parts of those steps. This next slide is really important because I and my fellow program monitors are looking for these things. We're looking to make sure that you always have training and that you have collaboration between your program and your fiscal staff. The fiscal people need to know what they need to do, and the program people need to know what they need to do, but they also need to know how they interact. So it's very, very important, especially for allowability. Sometimes the fiscal people may need to know a little bit about what is allowable and what's not allowable, because when they're paying something and it didn't go through the program staff or some piece was missing, the fiscal person could be a secondary look, right? And we want to have multiple people viewing these payments. That really makes it a lot more solid as far as internal controls. Responsible positions, and again, positions versus, my friend Anne over in the fiscal department, right? You want to make sure that the position is the responsible, the way that the procedures go, so that should somebody step out of that position and a new person step in, you don't have to keep updating or keep thinking, oh, have we had new positions or new people come in as far as staff. Timelines are really important. Especially when you think about time and effort, you want to make sure that if you have a personal activity report or a PARS or something that is looking at the daily activities of someone, because it fluctuates so much as far as the different cost objectives, the different types of duties that they do. If you have something on timelines, normally that needs to come to the district office or to some oversight before the next month ends, right? So a lot of times people say, we need to have that form to the district office by the 10th of the month. And if it's not there, there should be some kind of follow-up, like somebody will be calling somebody to say, hey, we didn't get this form, right? So So we're looking at people are making sure that everything is happening the way it should happen. That's a whole internal control policy. Reconciliation, if something's going different, and believe me, we're now finding that things can go differently in a month, right? In the beginning of March, was it March 2021? I think it was March 2021. In the beginning of March, you had no idea that you wouldn't be in the office at the end of the month, right? So understanding that things need to change and what would be the process of that change. And everybody's aware of how you make that change. What do I need to do in order to change what I'm doing? Because I have to, because we need to do that for the students. And then of course, personnel changes and how you interact with the procedures for that. And then having periodic reviews by multiple staff. I love new staff to come in and look at the procedures. They are the greatest people to be able to say, okay, I don't know anything. Let me look at your procedures. And if they can understand your procedures, you know you have something solid. That is a great way to introduce new staff and also make sure that your procedures are great, right? So that's a wonderful thing for new staff to be able to do. And as far as periodic reviews, in every December, it seems like they're upping the federal bid threshold. So right now it's 96,700. It normally ups a little bit. And that's a great thing for you guys, because you really do want to make sure that you have the highest possible number so that you don't have to do competitive sealed bids. So if you go to in December, like maybe the middle of the month, that number normally raises for the next year. That's a great time to do a review of your procurement procedures. Another time that might be a great time to review is every summer we have federal program monitoring training, and it's normally like on the cusp of July and August. And if you have somebody that's going to that, they could take some of these slides that we normally have and go through and say, okay, so what's different? How is this different than what we currently have? That's another great time to do a review. Location of documentation is an interesting one, because of course a lot of people use a shared drive. It's just trying to make sure that the documentation is not like 5 or 6 levels down as far as breadcrumbs are concerned. It should be somewhere where they can really clearly identify, this is where I go for federal procedures and policies. I've actually had some districts know that they have some policies and procedures and know that they've done them, and the school board knows. Everybody knows they have them, and yet they couldn't find them for me, and they had to redo them. So just be really careful about that. Just make sure it's really, really clear. This is front and center. You're probably going to get reviewed every 2 years, or at least, some of you are going to get reviewed every 2 years, and it's nice to have that pretty handy. And then of course, emergency procedures. We all know that that's really, really important. I think right now is a good time to take any questions on policies and procedures for a second, just because there were some things that might be questionable. Bonnie, did you see any questions in the chat?
Yeah, we have 3 questions. They may be on some topics you're going to discuss moving forward, but why don't I throw them to you and you can decide if you want to address them now or later.
Okay.
The first one had to do with gift of public funds, and particularly for students, gift cards for graduations, things like that, based on student need. And they want to know if these are allowable in any grants. So that was one area.
Okay, you know what? That is a question that I'm trying to figure out. So if it's are you saying that you would pay for gift cards for students with federal funds?
That's what's allowable. Some grants include funding that allows for gift cards for graduations. We have students that due to virtual education and pandemic have so many needs, what is allowable. So
Okay.
And I specifically mention gift cards.
Okay, gift cards. I would say I would stay away from gift cards. Okay, I'm just going to tell you that right now. You need to be able to show how it ties to academics in most programs, okay? I'm covering a lot of different programs like disaster recovery, federal program monitoring, and federal stimulus funds. So yes, there are going to be some some specific allowable places for that. But in general, no, don't do it. You want to make sure that everything that you're paying for, you can tie to a specific allowable item, salary, something that you can tie to, this is how it's compliant. A gift card could be a real problem if they purchase something that's not compliant, right? So I would be very, very cautious with that. And if you wanted a yes or no, I would say no.
Okay. All right, we had another question on equipment and the equipment threshold. It says for equipment management, what is the limit? Is it 5,000 for purchases, or are these for small items? What's the limit in terms of equipment?
So for equipment, you have to have CDE approval at $5,000, but at $500, you have to have the labeling, right?
Right.
And I will be going through that a little bit in more detail. So yeah, 5,000 you definitely want, in every instance, you want to have CDE approval if you have equipment that's $5,000 or more. And that would include, so say you're doing some kind of a smart board or something. I actually don't recall how much all these things are anymore. But say you have something that is like maybe $4,000, but you have to install it and you have to have certain pieces that go with it in order to make it functional. If all of those pieces and the installation reach over $5,000, it still needs to be approved by CDE. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Those 500, 5,000 can be confusing. So
right, and I have those I actually have that listed in our slides. We'll talk about them a little bit more detail.
Okay. We had one other question that's rather detailed and specific, and so you might want to respond specifically, but I'll throw it out there. It had to do with restricted funds, and can you discuss restricted funds for non-classroom based charter schools? And they're referencing Senate Bill 740, 40-80 spending requirement. Current law forces spending within the fiscal year due to SB 740 and funding determination. Our assumption is the one-time funding is restricted funds that we record as restricted fund balance does not follow SB 740 for non-classroom based charter schools. So a lot of detail there and very specific. So I'm not sure if
is that dealing with federal funds specifically or state funds?
They mentioned Title I. They said one-time funding or Title I, but does SB 740, I guess, place any additional restrictions on it?
Yeah, that would definitely need to be something I'd need to look up because I don't know that off the top of my head.
We will save that question for you and send it, and we can get a response in writing and send it out to the group.
That sounds great.
All right. And
okay, so we're good?
That's it for now.
Okay, thank you.
Whoops, wait a minute, one more.
Okay.
Snuck in there. Are charter schools required to follow procurement procedures?
If they receive federal funding, yes.
Okay, very good. All right.
Yeah. So so everything that I'm speaking of pertains to federal funding. So if you do not receive any federal funding, then this does not pertain to you. So even though some of these things I would say are really good things anyway, but this is really requirements from the federal government. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about policies and procedures. We're looking about federal compliance. It's really important that people understand that the real goal of this is to make sure that your school district can go on without you, okay? It's really great when you have wonderful people that really know everything and can do everything off the top of their head, and they just know all the answers and they understand federal compliance. The issue is you don't ever know what could happen to that person that has all the knowledge, right? You never want to have one person that just knows everything, because what happens is something could happen to that one person and then your school district is at a loss. So that's the whole goal about policies and procedures, is just to make sure that even though you may have somebody that really knows everything and you have resources to look at and all those good things, you want to make sure that everybody knows what needs to be done for each different person in your district. One of the things that you can do about that is have checks and balances. Make sure that there's multiple people knowing information as well as where everything is located. Everybody that deals with federal funds should know where policies and procedures are in some kind of shared drive. Or if you're old school, you can have a binder, right? That's totally fine. But that binder will need to be updated a lot. So you definitely want to make sure that you have a lot of paper for that. But you want to make sure that people are calibrated and that federal and program staff are aware of new laws and regulations, and that you're updating things, and that not only do the people that are actually in the weeds working on federal funds know what they need to do, but also the superintendent and the school board, they need to have some general knowledge of what's going on with those funds and what has to happen in order to get those funds, okay? We're going to be moving in now to fiscal compliance and evidence. This is our FMO1 item. So it's kind of a little bit, I'm doing this a little bit differently than we would if it was just normally fiscal monitoring. So, but this is our item in fiscal monitoring instrument, if that makes sense. These are the things that we look at. And one of the questions that was specific for this particular training was, hey, how do the LCAPs work in all of this, right? And really, I see the LCAPs a lot with time and effort records. So when we normally will ask for all the people that are paid with federal funds. So you at your district would give that information to us through the CDE monitoring tool, or CMT, and you would send that to us, and then we would look at all of the different people paid with federal funds, and we pull a sample. And when we pull a sample, what we're looking at is first of all, is that person's duty, are those person's duties allowable? Are they tied to some kind of goal? How do we make sure that person's salary should be paid for with federal funds? And one of the ways that we have that evidence is sometimes through the LCAPs, because the LCAPs have your general, this is what we want to be doing, and we can see sometimes through the LCAPs that, okay, this goes with how students are achieving more academically, because you have a TOSA that is going from school site to school site to school site, and that's part of their plan in order to make sure that all of their, for example, math teachers really need to know what's going on, and need to know how to make those standards really engage with students, right? Maybe that's in your LCAP, and that would be where we want to see that. There may be other reasons for the LCAPs too, but we're really looking to see, hey, what is your plan? What is going on with your district, and why do you think you need these funds for these positions? We're just trying to make sure that everybody understands what's allowable and what's not allowable. So that's where the LCAPs come in, okay? That's really the only place that I'm going to be talking. Well, I could talk at LCAPs another couple places, but is there some questions specifically on LCAPs?
Not seeing anything specific. There is a question on the general ledger.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Who do we contact to determine the fiscal year required for general ledger for an FPM review, the lead or the fiscal monitoring reviewer? If the review is in February, do you send an email? So that, how do you communicate the timeline for the general ledger?
Normally it's in the instrument. So if you read the instrument, it would say the last 6 months, or a full year, or it would be, so for example, if you're in fiscal monitoring, we would be reviewing the most recent 6-month period. So if it was in February, we would be looking from July to December of the previous year. If it turns out that you are getting an EL review, they look for 2 years of documentation of expenditures. So you would normally look at the instrument to find out what would be required. Even in our instruments for each item, we have some different things. Like for cash management, we want to see a full year of calculations of federal interest earned. So the general ledger is different for different reviews. So you'd want to look at the instrument for that. Again, for us, mostly it's the last 6-month period because we're taking a sample of a lot of different programs.
Okay, I had another question, an interesting question from a charter school, and they're asking about and again, it's related to the LCAP, but they're asking should they be putting all their federal title funds in? So Title 1, 2, 3, and 4, should they be putting those in LCAP, or what's your thoughts on that?
Okay, so sometimes you guys are going to ask me some questions that I don't know the answer for the specific titles. So some of the titles are asking for more information than what we do, because we are looking for fiscal things specifically, and I think the programs are looking for what your plans are a lot more detail, in more detail. So I wouldn't feel comfortable saying, yes, you must do all those things. I don't think there's anything wrong with putting all that information in there, because that's another way to show how you're tying federal funds to goals for your school site, right? And for charter schools, if it's, if you're a standalone, then you're not going to have a SIPSA, you're going to have an LCAP. So that would make sense to make sure that all your titles are identified. This money is coming from this title program, and this is why, and this is how it's meeting the goal. I think that's always a strong thing to do. However, as far as requirements, I do not know what those requirements for each one of the programs.
Okay. A clarification came in on the threshold, the $5,000 equipment threshold, and
Yes.
it has to. Does that have to do all items and installation? Would that be included? And labor, if it exceeds the 5,000, what components are included in that?
Yes, good question. Yes, anything to put the equipment functional. So if you have a piece of equipment that won't work unless you have someone put it together and install it, all of that money has to be included in how much it takes to get that equipment functional. So again, if the equipment is $4,000 and it takes $1,100 to install it, then that would absolutely need to be approved by CDE.
Thank you. And then that triggered another question from someone about, now, does that apply to the 500 on the equipment inventory if the total cost, as you described it, would that put it on the equipment inventory?
That I'm not sure. I mean, that's an interesting thing. I mean, equipment inventory, normally we're looking at the cost of the equipment themselves. So we're looking at a computer, and I don't think I've never looked at how much did it take to get it up and running. No, it would only be the actual cost of the equipment.
All right, good. And then I'm not sure if you're going to be talking later about duty statements versus job descriptions, but there was a request for that.
That is a perfect transition. I love that. Okay, so look at here. Here's our next slide. So duty statements and job descriptions, we use them pretty much I mean, you can give us duty statements or job descriptions. What happens sometimes though with job descriptions is they are used with your human resource department. So job descriptions may not be as specific as what we need for review. And it also may change. So for example, you may have a TOSA, or a teacher on special assignment. I'm sorry, I didn't define that. You may have a teacher on special assignment that has a job description, and the job description is fairly generic. We need someone with a master's degree in a specific area, and we need to make sure that they have had 15 years of training, or 15 years in the classroom, something like that. And so the job description and the requirements for the job may not be that detailed. You're looking to fill a position, right? And the duty statements normally are a little more specific. You've hired someone, you have the job, and now you need to go through, and for this particular TOSA, we want them to teach 4 different school sites, different math standards, and they're going to be going over professional development training once a month. They're going to have these TOSAs go in and do some teaching, and people will be, teachers will be watching them teach so that they can learn how to do some type of engagement activities. So the duty statements are mostly, they're less generic normally. But it doesn't matter. What we're looking for with both of these is that these would be compliant areas for federal funds. So if you don't have something specific in the job description, or if this duty statement needs to change or something like that, you definitely need to look at those prior to your review. Okay, do we need to update this job description? Do we need to update these duty statements? Because we need to know that what they're doing is compliant with how they're being paid. A lot of times for good practices, when you do review of duty statements or job descriptions, you think in the HR realm, so you may have a categorical programs director and a human resource person, and maybe the two of them get together periodically, just like you would with a fiscal staff person and a program person, or a categorical program review director. You may have all of them come together and say, you know what, we're paying these staff this way. How do we make sure that our duty statements and our job descriptions will be compliant for federal funding for these particular descriptions, right? So you may want to get the like I said, the fiscal, the categorical program director, maybe a program person like an EL program person, or a Title II program or Title I, get them all together and kind of look through these duty statements and job descriptions, and then say, okay, what makes sense for our district? We need to have something generic enough in our job description so that we can ask for multiple people. We don't have to keep creating individual job descriptions, but we also need to have something that we know will be compliant, because our plan is to have this position paid federally in some way, okay? And the same thing with duty statements. Only duty statements, you definitely want to make sure, if you are getting a person paid partly with general funds and partly with federal program funds, you want to make sure that it's very clear that these are the duties that fall under federal compliant duties, and these are the duties that we would want you to perform for general fund purposes, right? So it's very, very clear to the employee, hey, you know, you're only getting paid this much for federal and this much for in general fund. So the percentage of your time should be approximately these amounts, right? Or if it's not, then there needs to be a conversation with the employee and HR and maybe the categorical programs person, and say, hey, you know, this isn't working. This is not really what the students need. We need to change this in some way. Maybe we need to have more federal funds going to this particular employee, or more general funds going to this particular employee. But our goal is to make this kind of a fluid process so that the employee is empowered and the HR people understand what's needed for federal programs, and that the categorical programs isn't standing alone going, okay, how do I make sure all this works, right? It really should be a team effort. So hopefully that helps clarify duty statements and job descriptions. Was there another question on that?
No.
Okay, great. Okay, and then this important reminder is written policies and procedures are essential. This is, you know, procedure 905, like I said, this is you need to have sufficient detail to understand how the system will operate, okay? Again, these are things that you can look up if you need to. I'm gonna go through these slides fairly quickly because we're on slide 15 and it's 9:42. And I want to make sure that we have some time for other questions and that we get a chance to look at things. So what's really required are these are the different places that we have for the Code of Federal Regulations to show you where these parts are, where it says you have to do this, you have to do this. So here's all of those standards, and I give you notes on where you might find things and what we're looking for specifically, okay? So these are all for time and effort. I'm going to stop on cost objectives just for a second, because Cost objective is really just a duty. So if the duty is something that's allowable, that's what we're looking for as far as cost objective. It's the thing that they're doing. Are you working with small groups of English learners for 15 minutes a day? Yes, there you go, done. Cost objective right there, okay? I have some examples too right here, okay? If you're administrating Title I, if you are English learner instructional assistants, those kinds of things, okay? We wanna make sure that nothing that you're doing is mandated by the state. This is all some more standards that I talked to you about. All of these things you've probably seen before, but they have notes, and so it's really, really important that you look at them. The budget estimate piece is important just because the district and the fiscal people have a belief that this is how much money should be set aside for these salaries, right? But something may happen, and what actually happens may not be exactly what was budgeted. So understand that we love that you're organized, you understand that a budget is important, but you also need to be able to reconcile that budget with what really happens, okay? So be very careful about, okay, well, this person is 50% Title I and 50% general fund, and we're good to go. But that may not actually happen. Like the person may actually have to do more with their general fund duties because of something. And if that's the case, then you do need to reconcile the federal funds. Okay, this is a thing that's going to be important. So you know what, before I go to this, why don't we stop here on documentation for time and effort? Did anybody have any questions on that?
Nothing's come in. Nope, you're good.
Okay, so we understand what's required. Okay, now we're going to an area where we normally don't talk a lot about in our trainings, and there's a real reason why, okay? So, and I've seen this a lot in time and effort policies, okay? Not the procedures, but in policies, because this is in Procedure 905. You have the ability to have these substitute systems. And what people see in the substitute systems is they initially see, oh, wow, this is something where I could have somebody that normally does a personal activity report, and I only need to collect them like maybe, wow, or maybe even 3 times a year, maybe, wow, you know, that sounds great. We don't have to do this all the time. Okay, here's the super big caution, okay? The substitute systems were put in place for districts that have consistent employees doing the same things year after year after year. This is not a system for districts that have any kind of turnover, any kind of changes happening. And I've got to tell you, with what has been happening with the world with COVID, the substitute systems right now, I just can't imagine any district being successful with this right now. So this substitute system thing was really for those districts that literally had somebody that has been in their district for 20 years. All their employees are like, you know, they're lifers. And, you know, we do this every month. And instead of having to do it every month, the same exact thing that we've always been doing, wow, couldn't we make this a little simpler? Yes, there's a couple ways to do it as far as a substitute system. The issue with this is, in order to have strong internal controls, you really need to have like 1 or 2 years of monitoring this prior to putting it in place. So you want to show, before you do a substitute system, you want to show, hey, we've done our due diligence. We have people that have been here a long time. We know that our TOSAs are, you know, in place. They're not planning to leave. They're not planning to retire. They are going to be here for a while. They know what they need to do. They've been doing this for years. This is a great thing for us. And in some sense for the sampling method, you really want to make sure everybody has to be on it. Okay, so it's really important. It's not like you could just say, oh, well, you know, I have 2 or 3 employees that would do this. They're great. They're not going to change at all. But then you have 1 employee that changes all the time, or you can't keep a person in this position. that would mess you up. You couldn't use the substitute system. So it's really, really, really important to understand. This is really for those districts that just have something in place. They've done it for years. The employees are there. They understand what's required, what's not required. This is for mature time and effort reporting. So you've done time and effort for years. I can step it up. I want to do something because I know that we have a handle on this and that it's consistent all the time, okay? I'm just, that's my forewarning. We'll talk about it a little bit more, but I'll go into the different methods. Now, one of the things that Bonnie said at the beginning of this presentation was that there's some notes that I included on these slides. And these notes were, I mean, they're personal. I say, I am going to do this, and here's some thoughts and things like that. I'm personal on those notes, but what I'm saying to you is please read those notes, because I give you more information about what is going on with each one of these methods, because slides, you just can't, put thousands of words on a slide. So even though I've tried to put thousands of words in 95 slides, but anyway, you need to know that there's lots of details in this, and procedure 905 in CSAM will give you more information, but I'm trying to give it to you is what we need to know, right? Okay, here we go. So you have to have the proper completion of PARS, okay? How frequently PAR data must be recorded. This is one of the things that you need, is you need to have it, like, for example, when you had that timeline of everything's due by the 10th of the month, you want to make sure that everybody's completing them by the 10th of the month. If you have people that aren't completing them, another reason not to do the substitute system, although, you'd say, oh, well, it's less, less people less times that you have to do it. But if you're having problems getting it from them once a month, you're going to have problems getting it from them every 3 months, right? And you really need to be on top of this, okay? Just making sure you have a good internal controls over the system. Very, very important. Okay, so I've already said that. I bolded it for you, so it's really understandable. So everything, again, this one particularly, you just have to have 2 years of documentation, and you need to be able to say, we monitored it, we saw everything was okay, everything was consistent, we know that this is the percentage that they're doing on this particular program, and they're doing percentage on this particular program, and it's consistent down the line. There is nothing that's going to be inconsistent. And again, this is the sampling method, the first of 2 different kinds of substitute systems, okay? The first one is sampling method, okay? All multi-funded staff must participate. Again, if you have one person that, you monitored them for 2 years, they didn't have a consistent 2 years. 1 year they were 50% Title I, the next year they were 60% Title I. That's not consistent, right? So it has to be super consistent. So again, be very cautious with these sampling methods, okay? Okay, so that was the first one, okay? It's the sampling one. And again, I'm not going through them too detailed because I'm really hoping that you guys are not gonna choose to do these. But if you do, I would definitely, if you want to start for 2 years, I think with this COVID thing, this is not a good first year to start, right? But maybe next year, everything's going to be smooth as silk, then maybe you might want to start, in 2022, 2023. Here's the predetermined schedule. This one's a little bit easier, I would say. This one, if you have somebody that consistently goes to one place, one time, like for example, you have that TOSA who goes to school 1, school 2, school 3. There's a consistent schedule throughout the week. They always do those particular schools at a specific time. They're always training on specific things for English or English learners, or however they're doing it. It is just, that has worked well. It is the way it's going to be. That's the predetermined schedule. She or he does it every single time. So you know what? That may be a great thing for the predetermined schedule, right? This is, you know that they're going to do this every time, no problem. That is a good thought about predetermined schedule, right? So these are the requirements, okay? the last one, which is interesting, is you cannot work on multiple activities or cost objectives at the same time. So think about it this way. You don't want to say, I'm proctoring the CAST test while I'm doing sight words with a student online, okay? That's not allowable with this predetermined schedule, okay? So if you have somebody that multitasks and does things that one or a cost objective that would not be compliant with another cost objective, that's not going to work, okay? So just be careful about that. There's more, again, this is the predetermined schedule. You need to make sure you have the total hours. So sometimes people get a little tripped up on total hours. It means all the hours the employee is benefiting your district. So I do see a lot of times where a person has multiple jobs. They do, they're a part-time instructional aide being paid for with Title III funds for English learners. And then after school, they do some tutoring for Title I. And so we need to have both of those. But all of everything that they're doing in their day, we need to see the total hours that they're getting compensated, okay? Even though it may be two different jobs, we want to make sure we see how they don't overlap and how they distinguish their time, right? If the person has a predetermined schedule, we just need to see the total hours, make sure there's no overlap, okay? And this is an interesting one. So again, most of the time when I see semi-annuals, I see the employee and the supervisor sign the semi-annual certifications. Those aren't necessarily required, but in this predetermined schedule, it's absolutely required. And I would say you should always have your employee and supervisor sign semi-annual certifications anyway, because that shows strong internal controls, okay? Okay, so the deviation that you can have on this predetermined schedule, and again, I would really caution you if there's any deviation at all, okay? I mean, you're gonna have somebody that needs to go to the doctor, there's those normal things, but when you're talking about, this person is going to be training in Los Angeles for, a couple weeks in the beginning of the year, and that's not a normal thing that they do, and you know that they're going to be doing that, then this predetermined schedule is not for you, okay? So hopefully that will help you with that. Okay, so this is the big deal, the difference between the sampling and the predetermined. Predetermined schedule requires prior approval from CDE. This prior approval is on your CARS form, okay? So when you're filling out CARS, you may say there may be something on substitute system, and you're like, oh, what's that substitute system thing? That's where you would check to say, yes, we are on a substitute system, and you're checking that you're going to be doing the substitute system, okay? Okay, I am ready for questions now, because I think this is going to have lots of questions. Or, if you don't have questions, if you're like, oh, she sold me, I'm not into this, great.
A couple questions, and the question came in as you were starting this section, so you may be able to just summarize it. I think you've talked, and the question had to do is, do employees need to provide a schedule as backup, and do you have any sample forms for the substitute systems? Okay, so as far as what was the first question again? Oh, do you need a backup schedule?
Backup schedule, okay. So remember, for the sampling method, you have to have 2 years of documentation available for us to look at, okay? So you have to show us that 2 years you have been going through and everybody has had the same schedule, so you're good to go with those 2 years. That documentation has to be maintained. So I have to see that. As far as a sample schedule, that would be kind of a no-brainer. That's part of what you're going to show us to provide evidence that this is something that we should be doing. So yes, lots of documentation. And again, 2 years of documentation for the sampling method. You absolutely have to have that. So the forms that you use are not necessarily different. So for the substitute system, you can have a PARS form that you have been using, right? The only thing that would be different is you're only collecting it at periods as opposed to every month, okay? So we have to have all the documentation from prior years. And again, for the sampling method, you have to have everyone on that, right? Everyone on that. For predetermined schedule, it requires prior approval from CDE. So there's a couple things on both of those that are really, really important, okay? In addition to documentation that you have researched your district and you know that this would work for you, okay?
Okay, and then the question came in, the one that sort of triggered this whole conversation with us is a person saying they're new to the district and they're using, it appears, the old sampling system. And it was already in place before I got here. What do I do now about the 2-year documentation? Any suggestions for new folks?
Yes, I'd get off it if you don't have the 2 years of documentation, okay? So find out how they started, okay? How did they start, right? How did this go about? Somebody did something at some point, and before you go forward, you want to make sure as a new person that you feel comfortable and confident that you're not going to have different things happen to make sure that you are following federal compliance, right? So, for example, if it's always been the same way and the substitute system has been used, and it turns out that when I interview one of the employees that has I think I heard sampling method, and it turns out that they do lots of different things, and it's not consistent, and yeah, I've only done it every 3 months because that's the way we've always done it, but yeah, it's always different. That employee's salary might have to be reimbursed with unrestricted general funds. So really, really important to find out immediately from whoever has had longevity with the district. Hey, I see we're on a substitute system. How did this happen? Let's make sure we're on the same page. And if they do have some documentation from when that happened, maybe that employee wasn't there. So it may turn out that, oh my goodness, okay, so we need to put this person off of federal funds and keep the core people that have this sampling method that's already in place. Great, those people are going to be, good, but we're not going to be able to have this other person, paid with federal funds at all because they changed too much, and we have to have everybody on it, or everybody with PARS, okay, everybody that has changes each month kind of thing, not a semi-annual, right? You can have 2 different kinds of paid employees that have like a set schedule that would be a semi-annual certification. That's different than a predetermined schedule, a substitute system, okay? So understand that there's a little bit of a difference there. But the sampling method is for all people that would be normally on a personal activity report. Does that make sense?
That's good. Thank you. We got a question. It's actually a request, and it's a request we get a lot, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it. They're saying, can you send me a sample PARS report? And I'm just going to say the sample and procedure 905 makes me nervous. Should it?
Oh dear. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of times, different local education agencies share their forms. I mean, there's some great forms out there. I don't necessarily have the best ones, but I've seen some really great ones. And I agree with you. I think what happened with our procedure 905, if you have an older procedure 905, something before the most recent update, we had to be 508 compliant, and it was very difficult to put the PARS that we had used in the 508 compliant. It couldn't pass 508 compliance, right? So we couldn't put it in there. But that's one that I think a lot of people use because they feel really comfortable with it, because it has a list of all the different cost objectives, and you can fill it in. A lot of people have done Excel spreadsheets that are specific to their district, and I got to tell you, those rock, because if you have formulas that calculate everything for you, there's no human error there, right? And You know, if a person wants to email me, they can, but I don't know if I have anything that I could give. I mean, it would be really nice if you guys are chatting with each other. If you have a really good, I'm not seeing the chat, so I'm sorry if you're already doing this, but if you're an LEA that has a really strong PAR and you're willing to share it with someone else, that would be wonderful, because I think if we help each other out that way, that would be great.
I think the concern that I had on the one in CSAM is that it's so vague, and it's
right.
not, yeah, so we've seen some that are a little bit more detailed as to the activity. So that was all.
Yeah.
I have a question came in about prior approval. This came from earlier. And as I understand, the prior approval, it depends on the program you're requesting it from. So it's different offices. They want to know a contact person. I think it's Kevin Donnelly for Title I, as I recall. And I think it's Signs office for ESSER, but I don't know. For prior approval, is there a one-stop shop, or does it depend on the program? For
no, you're absolutely right. I think it's Joseph Signs, and I think it's Kevin Donnelly. So but that's a little bit out of my purview. So I don't give the approvals. I just know you have to have them. So
okay, very good. And there's a question.
I'm just looking at the approvals. So yeah, it depends on the office.
Okay, very good. All right, we'll let you go ahead.
Okay. Again, we're looking at time here. I'm looking at time here a little bit, and we're on 33. I definitely want to make sure that you guys have access to all of these different slides. So if we skip over something that you really wanted me to talk about, let me know. But I'm going to skip through some of these a little bit because we're talking about allowable costs. And some people really have a great handle on it, and some people, you know, you need to have maybe more things in place to look at allowability, okay? So the real key piece of this is necessary, reasonable, and allocable. And allocable means that the percentage of benefit that the person is getting from the program, so say they're getting 60% Title I funds, that 60% of their time is doing Title I activities, okay? So very, very important that it's allocable. And allocability is actually where we get a lot of those reconciliation pieces, right? So if somebody is doing less Title I activities, the district needs to have something in place with their fiscal staff to say, hey, we need to have a little bit more money for Title I for this employee, or you know what, this employee doesn't need as much Title I funding. We need to change their percentage. So there should be some kind of relationship with the fiscal and the program to be able to have that flexibility to change as needed, okay, and reconcile. That's part of the procedures that you have, okay? Necessary and reasonable too. People go, necessary and reasonable. Wow, that's just so vague. Well, I mean, if you're a person, I'm a person, and you know, if somebody's getting paid $1 million for something that you think is not worth $10, you know, that's not okay, right? So you want to make sure, and that's, you know, of course, that's really a big hyperbole, but I feel like, you know, if you were in a court of law and you were judging someone's reasonable and necessary expenditure, what would you say? Well, how would you say, yeah, that's fine. You know, you shouldn't be paying $50 for a stapler, but maybe you should if it's a specific stapler that, you know, has something for maybe disabilities or something like that. Maybe it's a special stapler that is going to save you a ton of time. You have to be able to justify it, right? So, you know, why was a dollar stapler not reasonable, right? I think you guys can all get that, but that is our job. We have to make sure that everything that you're giving us is reasonable. And then of course the necessity of it. So keep those 3 words in mind when you're talking about allowability, as well as supplanting, right? Okay, these are the things that we review, but I'm not going to really get into that. I already talked about the conflict of interest policy, the disciplinary procedure. So these next slides we normally don't show, but I wanted to show them because I feel like sometimes people don't use our web pages as much, and there's so much in the CDE web pages. So if you look and see, like, authorized use of funds. And it could be that you're not using the word authorized, right? And maybe that's not getting to you to the right pages. But at CDE, there's all of these pages that you can use to make sure that you're compliant with federal funds. And I have seen some LEAs that are amazing. And what they do is whenever they have any kind of expenditure, they have a form, and it could be, of course, an online form or whatever. But on that form, they say, what is the justified, how is this justified? How is this necessary? And they can literally put, you know what, this activity is aligned to meet the challenging state academic content standards. We are asking for additional math curriculum that will be used to supplement our current math textbooks, okay? Boom, you know that's an authorized use of funds, right? So let's go through, so these are all on our web pages, and I'm just gonna show you some of the stuff that we have. So look, if you can justify with these bullets here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one right here, if you can justify Title I Part A funds with any of these things, you know you're good to go, right? That all those things are what you need for Title I Part A. And then if you have a school-wide program, you need to look at these things. It meets an identified need in the comprehensive needs assessment. It's included in the SPSA, right? So these are all the requirements. And maybe if you had this like front and center on your allowability procedures, this might be helpful. And again, maybe you have a training with fiscal staff and the different school site councils, just showing them all these things that this is what you need to have in order to be compliant for Title I. And then this is for a targeted assistance schools, which are those that are not school-wide. So again, that's even more specific how you want to make sure that you're applying these funds to the students themselves, right? And not benefiting the entire population. So you definitely want to make sure that those bullets that I showed you, that you are seeing those and saying, you know what, this is our rationale. And if you can justify it and tie it directly to one of those rationales, you're going to be great, right? That is going to be fabulous. This is how it's benefiting our students academically. And I feel like that is all you really need. And if you can get people to understand, wow, that's the real, that's the priority. That's what we have to do. Well, then I think you're going to really find that your expenditures are never going to be out of alignment, right? So that is the goal of these slides. And then of course, Title II, we're talking about supplemental activities. The piece that I've heard from Title II where there's a lot of confusion is when you're talking about superintendent or that kind of administrative training that you think, oh, Title II is PD for anybody. But no, it might not be. Even for counselors, you're trying to tie the PD or the professional development to the teachers. How are the teachers getting the benefit, right? And the principals, even when you're doing PD for principals, you're showing how the principals are going to benefit the teachers by this additional professional development. So you're really always pulling it back down to the teaching staff. The teaching staff are benefiting in this, right? So, and these are all this is the purpose. So if you can get people to say, you know what, this is what the Title I funds are for, there you go, you're good to go, right? And again, all of these are on our website. And we normally don't show these because these are normally the Title I, II, III, all the offices, they have their own allowability pieces, but these are all on our website. So if you're looking for something, put Title II and see what's on our webpage, because the search is where you really want to go. You want to go to the search. You don't necessarily want to kind of dig through everything. You want to just go to the things that you need to see, right? Now we're going to Title III, which of course is even more specific, right? Title III doesn't have a lot of funds, and they really are protective of their funds. If you have a question about using Title III funds for allowability, I would not use it, okay? Because they will want you to reimburse their program. Make sure that it's tied to these activities, right? Make sure that it's really clear. This is what the use of the Title III funding is for, okay? All this is in your, well, currently you have it in a PDF, but again, it's all on our webpage, right? All on our webpage. Title III is fabulous as far as giving you ideas, Okay, so I mean, like you can look and see, wow, okay, that's a great idea. I love that. Oh, that's a great idea. I like that too. And again, this is specific to immigrants, right? And as far as the immigrant funding is concerned, it's the only one, and I am gonna say this. I'm gonna say this, okay? Don't ever use federal funds for food, except in the immigrant area. If you need to have parents come in for something and you need to have some food for that population, I've seen that be allowable many times. And I've seen it a little bit for Title I if you can justify that parents won't come unless you give them cookies for parent engagement. But you really, really want to stay away from food. Absolutely no food for Title II at all ever. And not for Title III other than immigrant, okay? So just, we're really trying to make sure all this money stays to educate the students, okay? And they're giving some other examples that you can do. And you know, the nice thing about these examples is it gives you ideas and you can jump off those ideas, but know that they're allowable, right? Okay, and then now we're gonna go into a little bit more on allowability. We wanna make sure for district level expenses that you have them in your LCAP. Remember, we talked about how do we justify that this expense is allowable. In the LCAP, in the federal addendum, in the CONAP, those are all things that we need to make sure that if you're at a district level and you have some expenses, that they're in there. You know what, I'm gonna stop. Well, okay, let me just go through these pretty quickly for allowability. For school level, you wanna make sure that if you have a Title I expenditure, it's in the SIPSA, it has to be approved by the school site council. If you have material changes, anything over 10% is what I would normally recommend, unless you have a huge amount of money, and then 10% may be too much. Maybe you want to do 5%, right? Anyway, you want to make sure that the school level expenses are in the SIPSA for Title I. And these are the procurement requirements. And again, we talked about the bid threshold already. And one thing I want to make sure that you understand is when you have a contract like with Title IV, and you want to have somebody do an after-school program, somebody at your district or somebody at that school is responsible to make sure that that contractor is doing what they need to do in order to be compliant. You're kind of like us when you contract other vendors. We have to make sure that the money that we receive from the federal government is being used correctly, so we have to review you guys. If you have a contract with another party, you as a school or a school district have to review and make sure that what they're doing is compliant with federal funds, okay? We've talked about conflict of interest and a little bit with competition. This is another piece for the procurement, and this is for allowability, right? These are the different types of procurement that we've talked about, and you've probably seen as well. There's the 96.7 and there's the 250. That doesn't really matter for us because this is for federal only. So if you live in Kansas, it would be $250,000, but if you live in California, it's $96,700. You have these procurement standards. You've probably seen them before. I want to make sure that we get to another part of allowable bill of costs is making sure that the things that you can't have, like alcohol, that's a no-brainer, right? There's certain things in 200-420 that you have to make sure that you have certain things for advertising. Like, for example, advertising is not allowable. And so some people think, well, for the planners, wouldn't it be great for the kids to see their school name on the planners? And that's just not allowable. So then we'd have to, you wouldn't be able to do the planners, but generic planners you could. So just being careful about all those things. These are red flags right here as far as allowability. That is, I just wanted to kind of get through allowability so you guys could ask me some questions on allowability, because we are getting close to the end of our time. And I want to make sure that we also get to supplement, not supplant. So did you guys have any specific questions?
No, everybody kind of got hung up. I think there's a lot of capital expenditures going on out there because that one got everyone's attention. but
Oh, okay.
but I think we got that. Let's see. A question did just come in though, for a single school LEA, like a charter. It's about supplement, not supplant. So they want you to talk about that in relation to charter schools and single school districts. So,
Okay.
and then expand on the last red flag. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, food catering.
Yeah.
Like I said, don't do food or catering. That's really an easy one. Use general funds for that if you really want to. We always pull anything that says from Costco or any kind of food place. We're going to pull it.
I think the one they're looking at is that variety of school site expenditures in Title I in the school plans.
Oh, okay. So so for example, if you have Office Depot, 5 different places in your school plans, and it turns out it hits a certain threshold, like maybe 96,700, be careful, right? Also, you could have school site expenditures from multiple schools in your district. So you use Home Depot at 5 different schools, and the amount at the district level gets to like $107,000, right? So that's a problem because then you do some procurement for over the 96,700 threshold. Okay, so we're at the district level, the fiscal people, and we're seeing how much money is going from your district to one particular vendor. So be very careful about that in your school plans. Okay, so if you have everybody using Home Depot, and that I would say that's the one that kind of goes under everybody's radar because it's just, it's a couple thousand here, it's a couple thousand there, and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, it's over 100,000, and then you go, oh, we didn't realize it was that much, and then you have a lot of reimbursement.
Okay, and there was a request. You mentioned something maybe about a justification form. So do you have a justification form you described earlier? I'm not sure what. Unless that's the prior approval form, I'm not sure.
Right. So I was just stating that a great way to have internal controls is to create a justification form for each one of your expenditures. It makes your categorical programs director super happy because they don't have to go back and find out, okay, why did we do this? And you don't have to remember why you did it, right? So it says what funding source was used and why it was used and how it ties to the plan. I've actually seen people put, in our school, the school plan says, this is the funding that we need and this is how much it is. And this is, and so this is where on page 7, it has the approval for this particular expenditure. I mean, what a great thing, right? You already have all the documentation in place on one form and you don't have to, when you have a monitoring review, you don't have to worry about it. You've got everything in one place.
Okay. And a question about slide 75, your red flags. I think the conference one raised a question and related to Title II. They're saying, does that mean travel and conference expenses aren't allowable under Title II is the question. Is that what?
No. So what I'm telling you with these red flags is these are what we're pulling. If you have a conference listed as an expenditure, we're going to pull that because what we need to look for a conference is we need to see, first of all, is the activity or the professional development for that conference, is that an allowable use of the federal funds? Was the travel to the conference necessary and required? Did you have 15 people come and they each drove their car 300 miles and got, the car expense and everything when it would have been $49 on Southwest, right? I mean, so those are expenses we always look at. For conferences, a lot of time, well, you have to have some kind of travel approval, right? Normally you have to have a pre-approval for travel. We're going to be looking at all of those forms. Did they get the pre-approvals? If you have something in your procurement or your procedures that say you must have school board approval for something that is out of state and they didn't get it, then that would be a reimbursable expense. So you have to be really careful to follow your travel procedures. And for conferences, again, what we had a few times last year was because of COVID, people couldn't travel. Well, then we had to, and they prepaid for conferences. Now the prepayment was fine because they didn't know that they weren't going to be able to go at the time that they prepaid and they couldn't get a reimbursement, and that was okay. But if they didn't try to get a reimbursement, or they didn't say, is there any way to get this money back, then that was a reimbursable expense, because they didn't even ask the question, right? So, those conferences and travel when I say red flags are, hey, we look at the general ledger and we see these kind of things, we're going to be pulling them.
I think that raised a lot of questions just about people got nervous or conferences not allowed, and we're seeing that, and it needs to be
right.
documented. And then
right.
there was a question about the advertisement in the school planner. Somebody asked if you could go back over that one. They kind of missed that.
Absolutely, because I've seen it a lot. So anytime you have a school planner, just get the school planner, okay? Don't put your name of your district, don't put the name of the school, don't put anything on that planner that you have to pay for, okay? Now, what I've told people is, as long as you don't pay for stickers for your school with federal funds, you could get school stickers and have the kids put stickers on their books or on their planners. That's great, as long as those stickers aren't paid with federal funds. But the planners themselves need to be generic. Otherwise, they shouldn't be paid with federal funds.
Okay, and the other, again, meals and conferences, reimbursement for meals when at a conference, is that allowable?
Yes, that's allowable. Of course, it's all reasonable and necessary, part of the conference. I mean, you're wanting to make sure that the conference is, like, for example, if the conference is at your school, you're not going to be paying for food, right? You normally go to school, you go home, or you bring your lunch or whatever. That's normally, you don't have any kind of food at a conference at your local school. If you're going to a conference in another state, then you want to make sure that, okay, is the food included? If the food is included in the conference amount, then we should not be seeing additional food expenses, right? Just like any kind of, you're just looking to make sure that everything's paid for reasonable and necessary. Those are the key pieces.
And guidelines for parent engagement and food?
Do not do anything more than you have to. If you, and again, whenever you're talking about parent engagement, I get it. Parents won't come if there's not anything there. And some people are kind of adverse to having cookies because it's not healthy. But you cannot have, real dinners or anything like that. That will be unallowable. If you really feel like you need to feed them dinner, then you need to pull it out of general fund, not out of federal program funds.
Okay, these folks really want to get those logos on those planners. I'm telling you, they're trying to find a way there. What if there's no cost, they're saying, for the logo?
Well, okay, so it should be clear that there's no cost for customization. Okay, if you can show justification that, oh, they just did this out of the, a planner is $10, and we look to find the best deal for the planner, and they're all $10. But this particular vendor said it's still $10, but we'll give you free customization. Then great. But you have to show me that other planners were $10 too, and so that you didn't have to pay anything extra for the customization. So you want to make sure you have evidence that you didn't pay anything extra, even though if customization is free. A regular planner is not going to be like, if you could get a regular planner for $10 and this planner is $20, then that's not going to work, right?
Okay, I think I need to let you go ahead and finish those slides.
I know, I'm on 77, I got 20 more. Okay, so here we go. For supplement, not supplant. Oh wait, what did I put here? What cost objective? Oh, these are other cost objectives that are red flags, which you'll have in your slides, okay? Just employees and stuff doing stuff that with federal funds that are not allowable. Okay, so for supplement, not supplant, the piece is for Title I at the district level, Title II, 3, and 4. You're not going to pay for anything that the state already pays you for, okay? So if you're getting paid to do the LPAC, which you are, you can't have anybody paid with federal funds to proctor that LPAC, okay? If you're getting paid for textbooks, you can't pay for textbooks with federal funds, okay? be very, very careful with that as far as supplement, not supplant. Now, the issue with Title I at the school site level. So if it's something that's in your SPSA, you don't have to worry about supplanting, okay? They've taken away that whole allowability piece at the school level. So if something is in your SPSA, there is no supplanting for Title I. However, there's still an allowability requirement. So say you decide, okay, we have a goal of parent engagement. You know, it'd be great to have the parents come and do yoga on Monday nights. That would engage parents. Nope, that's not allowable with federal funds, okay? So, but can you have a person support a student doing some test practice or something? Sure, we need students to focus on test skills, right? And so you put it in your SPSA. These are things that we know will help our students learn how to take the test better, okay? Yeah, that could be a problem if it were Title II, Title III, or Title IV, or Title I at the district level. But if it's at the school site level, there's no presumption of supplanting, okay? So that's the key difference between Title I at the school site level. It has to be in the SPSA, tied to a goal and an allowable use of funds. Okay? Is that that's the supplement, not supplant key piece there. Let me see if I have any other slides that I want to, well, I can tell you about the exceptions. So if you're, because I know we have some charter schools here. If you are a Title I school and you're a charter, or you're a single school LEA, you won't have to have any kind of methodology on what to do with state and local funds. And the way that they do this at the district level is they say you are not taking away Title I funds from any other school by using more state and local funds at non-Title I schools, okay? So that at the district level, you want to make sure that your state and local funds are distributed equally among all schools, including your school-wide Title I or your targeted assistance schools, okay? And that's this methodology test that we have. And if you have questions on that, just email me because it's at 10:30 right now. So let me just go through and see if there's anything else that's really key. I think you had one thing that, this is what has to be in each SPSA, and that's important. This is the Title I reservations. Okay, this is the one thing that I normally don't put in slides, and I want to make sure that we cover for a quick moment. If you have a question on Title I reservations, these next 3 slides are what you need to look at, okay? This one, it says the LA reservation evidence may take multiple forms. These are the different types of documents that you can use for evidence. And then they just are looking for alignment between LEA level planned expenditures and the general ledger, okay? That's the big thing. Okay, and then of course, best practices are great, and this is our information. Okay, so if there's any other questions, I know it's 10:31. I'm happy to answer for a couple minutes, but I know everybody's time is valuable.
This one had to do with federal, well, any COVID-related funds, and it had to do with the same idea of customized face masks. So you still have that requirement for not having logos. And
right. So the Edgar is for all federal funds. Okay. Unless it waives that, and I'm not aware of the waiver. But there could be a waiver. I know they have some waivers on supplement, not supplant for the federal stimulus funds. I would just stay away from it if at all possible.
Okay. Question about, let me see, it was another food related. If the conferences, if a conference virtual, but it's for an entire workday, will you cover a teacher's meal with federal funds?
Oh, no. An online?
Okay.
No, not at all. No.
Okay, very good. Let's see. Can you talk a little bit about labeling for equipment $500 or more?
Yes, that's actually in my notes. If you go to equipment in Edgar, you'll be able to find out exactly what's needed on that label. And it's also in the notes under the equipment part.
Okay. And I think you talked about school plans. Next time we're going to have you as a two-parter. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I think that's it. We could probably stay here forever, but people are saying it was very helpful and they really appreciate it being succinct and informative. So I told you she's amazing. So hopefully she's your reviewer.
Yeah.
Now she's got
Everybody's
to go
amazing
out
in our
and
office.
do the other part of your work. All right. So the
Okay.
slides are now posted with her invaluable notes up there. And we appreciate so much you being with us, Marianne. This was terrific. And hope you'll come back again because
Yeah.
there's a lot more questions out there. And here's
Anytime.
her contact information. So follow up and you can contact her directly with questions. Okay. Thanks, Marianne.
Great.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Have a great day.
Okay. Happy reviewing.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.